The Sun's team in Israel was today shown one of Iran's huge K-bar-Shekan missiles down during last week's blitz. It was felled by Israel's Arrow 3 interceptor rockets after entering low orbit at up to 5 times the speed of sound. The rocket's enormous fuel tank crashed into the Negev desert just half a mile from Arad, a southern Israeli town of 28,000 people. Its 1-ton warhead exploded in the upper atmosphere as scores more were shot down, preventing unprecedented carnage on the ground. It was one of at least 181 ballistic missiles launched by the rogue Islamist regime, and Israel is now poised to strike back and further escalate the widening conflict. The 37-foot missile shell was first discovered by local children and became a playground for them as they climbed onto it to pose for selfies and daubed it with graffiti. Israel is yet to respond to Iran's second thwarted blitz in the last 6 months, but has vowed to punish its arch-foe with an attack on military, oil or nuclear sites. A stash of weapons seized from Iran's Lebanese Hezbollah terrorist enemies was also displayed and ramped up fears of global escalation. IDF chiefs said Russian-made high-tech weaponry made up 60 to 70% of arms recovered so far from the Israeli ground operation in southern Lebanon. Markings on some of the Cornet's anti-tank weapons, which could have arrived via Iran or Putin forces fighting in Syria, suggested they had been manufactured in Russia as recently as 2020. Meanwhile, bloodshed spiraled across the north of Israel as Hezbollah rockets killed an Israeli couple out walking their dogs in Kiryat Shimona near the Lebanese border. In the city of Hadera, 2 victims of a terrorist knife attack were fighting for their lives, and 4 more were wounded after an Arab Israeli sped around the city on a moped on a stabbing spree. Hezbollah also continued its attacks on the northern port of Haifa, injuring 5 people with a 40 rocket barrage a day after more than 100 launches. The casualties in Israel were reported as Israeli warplanes continued to attack terror sites across southern Lebanon and areas of southern Beirut. Nick Parker for The Sun in Israel.
I think that Hezbollah's request for a ceasefire shows that it's battered, and I do not think that the Israelis are at a stage where they're going to take their foot off the gas pedal. The desire isn't for some sort of amicable ceasefire that punts the ball down the field for 3 or 5 years down the road. I think the Israelis are looking for Hezbollah to be eliminated as a military threat. And for the northern border, where there are no land disputes, where there is nothing for the masses who protest on behalf of the Palestinians to say, we will free Lebanon. Lebanon is held hostage by Hezbollah and an Iranian-backed proxy. So I think that eliminating Hezbollah's military might is one of the ways that an overall security situation can be restored and how the Middle East can possibly move forward. Israel is facing a 7-front war, and the most dangerous war for Israel was always Hezbollah in the north. And I think that if you look at some sort of perspective in the year that has passed since October 7th, it's clear that the Israeli intelligence apparatus did not view Hamas as an existential threat to the survival of the state of Israel. And much of that focus went on Iran and went on Hezbollah in the north. And I think that the way that Israeli intelligence and the Israeli Air Force have targeted Hezbollah, dismantling it brick by brick, and really bringing it almost to a point where it's on its knees, it's not quite there yet, shows that enormous work has been done to try and eradicate that organization and to eliminate it from the Middle Eastern order of battle. And I think that that's essential. There are a lot of people who say that, and they're correct, that Iran is the head of the snake, and it's important to decapitate it. But one of the strengths of that snake was a powerful paramilitary group, terrorist organization, and criminal enterprise like Hezbollah that had amassed 150,000 plus missiles and rockets aimed at Israel. Hezbollah and the Iranians have built up a state within a state in Lebanon and based in Beirut for the past 17 plus years. And the notion was, as far as Hezbollah had always thought, was that Israel would make the same mistakes it made in 2006 when Hezbollah kidnapped two soldiers across the frontier in a cross-border attack, and Israel responded, and it became a very difficult 34-day campaign for the Israelis. Here, the Israelis did something else. The Israelis decided that they would go after the top down. And going after the top down rendered the forces in the field leaderless and insecure. The Israel has not taken responsibility for the beepers and the walkie-talkies, but that created psychological fear and disruption in the ranks of the forces that were stationed opposite Israel in southern Lebanon. And if you are not led, if your leadership is in the hospital or eliminated, it creates a weakness that can be exploited by a sophisticated conventional military force like Israel that has a powerful air force and incredible intelligence capabilities. Hezbollah, especially their force, their Radwan force, special operations entities, are very capable. Hezbollah is a very different beast than Hamas, far more sophisticated. But what the Israelis had uncovered was that Hezbollah was planning to carry out an October 7th-like attack through tunnels into northern Israel and to flood 3 or 4 times the number of armed men into Israel and to seize most of the north and Galilee. And obviously, a sovereign nation cannot sustain day-to-day life with that sort of threat. The fighting is going to be fierce. It's going to be up close and personal, and there will be losses on the Israeli side. I think that the 11 months or 12 months of fighting of tit for tat missile attacks across the border emptied northern Israel and emptied southern Lebanon. So the civilian population isn't there. So this wouldn't be the sort of human shield type of apparatus where that Hamas used in Gaza, hiding behind women and children. Here, this would be a counterinsurgency campaign, and it'll be difficult. But Hezbollah has been weakened, and I think that Israel, the Israeli leadership, both political and military, want to make sure that as far as this goes, they get the job done. The question is, what do you do? Do you go all for broke and go after the nuclear sites? I don't think, well, the Israelis have said that it would be difficult for them to do that unilaterally. And they would need American support. The Americans, especially before a presidential election, don't seem to have the stomach or the appetite to do that. And regardless of party affiliation, when Trump was in the White House, he didn't go after the nuclear sites either. So I think that that is a target that might not be on the table. Um, do the Israelis want to hit Iran's oil facilities and perhaps raise the price of fuel for people before the winter and before a presidential election? Perhaps not. I, in my estimation, the Israelis will do something very significant, but something that tells the Iranian people that their leadership is faulty. Their leadership has led them down a path that of pure destruction, and that the Iranian economy in tatters, where electricity is rationed in Tehran and all the other cities, is the people are really reeling from the effects of the mullahs and the Revolutionary Guard, while untold billions were invested in Hezbollah and Hamas and the other proxies around the region. And I think this will cause a lot of political awakenings in Iran if the Israelis do something at the power base. His options are running out, and the only thing that's keeping him alive, or anyone in his inner circle that's left with him alive, are the belief that he has surrounded himself with some of the remaining hostages who are still alive themselves. And it's as much as returning the hostages is a moral imperative for Israel and a definition of who they are as a state. it is also, in geopolitical terms, incredibly a challenging dilemma. Um, can a nation be held hostage? Can a terrorist group that has done nothing for its people other than bring great destruction and misery be allowed to hold a sovereign democratic nation um, hostage? You can ask that for the Arab states in the region. You can ask that for Great Britain and all the other countries in the West. Would they allow it? So I think that the Israelis are close to him. I think that they have been very close a few times and have missed. And I think that from the point of bringing the conflict to conclusion, you need a bin Laden moment. You need to show that he did not survive this. There has been some discussion that he's asked for exile and safe passage. Obviously, the memories do not fade, and the long arm of justice pursues people sometimes decades after the fact. But his elimination and the symbolism of eliminating terror chieftains who decided on their own, more or less, to bring such destruction and horror, these people must go.